Thank you very much for inviting me back. Dogs Trust is one of the most amazing organisations, as you well know. And I have had the pleasure of using this incredible technique for over 21 years. I'll be totally honest, when I first heard about TTouch, it was from my partner, Tony Head, who's joined us sitting at the back, who phoned me from Los Angeles, where he was filming in great excitement, saying that he'd seen this incredible technique on an infomercial, and this reactive dog was trying to fell a dog that was walking at a fair distance to it in the park, and this woman had put a stretchy bandage on the dog and just started to move the skin on the dog's body with her hands, and the dog just settled and calmed and was able to walk in a parallel walk with the dog that not that long before had been obviously very concerned about. And my response was, darling, you've been in California far too long. There's no way that can work like that. Come back, pick up horse poo and get your feet back on the ground. And I'll be totally honest that I completely dismissed this as a useful teaching tool. We then had a horse that fell probably in the field as a 2-year-old whilst he was with friends up on a stud farm. And he did untold damage to his pelvis, but it wasn't picked up until the muscle imbalance was really quite extreme, because the body's really good at compensating and adapting. We adapt, our animals adapt, and the earlier we can spot things, the easier it is to restore as much harmony as possible. But I was left with a fast-growing 17-hand warm blood, which for people that are non-horsey, that's quite a big, sensitive breed type. And I was looking for something I could do because I wasn't sure whether we were doing the right thing in keeping him alive. Could we really offer him a quality of life? Were we limited with what we were going to be able to do in terms of advancing this horse's education? Because his pelvis was literally completely crooked. And I started to read a book that somebody had recommended at an animal health seminar. And at that time, I didn't realize it was the same technique that Tony had seen on television in California. But what Linda was saying about how the brilliant body can compensate and adapt, and how habits can be helpful, but then can actually start to limit the potential of every animal, whether it's a postural habit or a behavioral habit. Her words started to really resonate with me because my background, as well as having ridden since I was 4, bought my first dog when I was 11, I was also a human massage therapist as well. And what Linda was talking about was not just in terms of the muscles, but working with the nervous system, helping to use calm handling techniques and quiet leading exercises to help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest, digest, and learning part of the nervous system, and also to help improve physical balance, which would have a knock-on effect and improve mental and emotional well-being as well. My horse was started on the saddle. He did go on to compete. He competed in low-level dressage, but show classes. And when judges got off him, they would say, that's the most balanced horse we've ever ridden. Luckily, they obviously also had a really bad eye because the horse was always slightly crooked. But what we taught him was to move his body as effectively as possible. And we lost him about a month ago, age 26. So we gave him a really amazing quality of life. And he really was instrumental in bringing TTouch to the UK. So one of the things that Linda said was this recognizing a link between posture and behavior. And that was something that absolutely grabbed my attention, because I could see with some of the animals that I knew that there were quite specific postural traits, which absolutely married certain behavioral traits as well, regardless of the species. I started to see the same patterns of movement linked to the same patterns of likely responses to touch and to stimulating situations in horses and cats and dogs as well. And one of the hardest things to answer is the most commonly asked question, what is TTouch? And to me, the name actually doesn't do itself any favors, because yes, we use a system of gentle body touches, moving the skin, sliding our hands over the coat or maybe along the ears. But we also use really slow on-lead exercises to help improve the posture and to help diminish reactive, over-the-top, non-thinking behaviours that are associated with the sympathetic nervous system. The body wrap was something very novel over 30 years ago, and now people really understand the value and have gone on to develop things like the thunder shirt and the anxiety wrap as well. And so many of the current thinking in terms of proprioception and everything, in terms of working with dogs, regardless of whether they're going to be competition dogs, but really enhancing environments within the shelter, was something that Linda Tellington-Jones was looking at over 40 years ago. She wrote the first physical therapy book for horses in the 1960s. So we also look at human posture, particularly when holding the lead. And I've got some slides. We've also got the brilliant Mavis. So I'm going to do sort of a mix-up of just showing some simple tips that you can take back and utilise already with the dogs in your care. The body work really can help change a dog's memory of a traumatic experience, particularly where there is pain or fear of pain involved. Do we know exactly what's happening? No, we don't, but we do know we are probably influencing the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest-digest part, and the nervous system stores memory. It can remember something in one experience, and that can be either a positive experience or an unpleasant experience. And a lot of the responses that you see when dogs are lip licking or moving away, they're nervous system responses. They're not necessarily thought through. And it's really important to remember that regardless of what someone may tell you about a dog, watch the dog, because the nervous system never lies. We as species can be really polite. We can say what we think somebody wants us to say when they've asked us a question. But if you actually start watching the micro information in their body, you'll get a true response. And when I put my hands on someone that wanted to feel this quiet circular movements of the skin, it was really interesting because immediately under my hand I could feel her skin tense, and she just leaned slightly to the right. And I said to her, "How was that for you?" And she said, "Oh, it felt really good." And I said, "Well, your nervous system has just told me a completely different story. Have you had a lot of trauma on the left side of your body?" And she said, "Yes, I've had broken bones all down that left side after coming off a horse." She thought I wanted to hear it was good. Maybe she wanted to enjoy the sensation, but her body told me a completely different story. Bubba G, don't know if you know the story of Bubba G, was found abandoned by a dumpster with his head really seriously injured. I think some of the scalp had been ripped off his ears. It was a dog that was in America, probably as a result of dog fighting and terrible injuries to his entire body. And he had been left for dead. He recovered, he was rescued, he's with an amazing organisation, but he was really understandably wary about contact on his head and also his tail, which had sustained significant injuries. And this is a practitioner, Cindy Van Fleet, near Los Angeles, who started working where the dog felt okay being touched, on the shoulder, working up to the neck, and then starting to just give a new experience of just quiet movement with the skin, curling the fingers so that there's less heat from the hand, maybe triggering a memory of a lot of handling when he was really in distress at the vets as well. And this dog, within one session of TTouch, was able to not only tolerate but also enjoy contact around this part that he'd obviously been wary about for many, many months. And this is why sometimes it looks unbelievable, this work, because sometimes the change that we get in response to contact is instantaneous. Other times we need to build up, but we always need to keep looking at the dog, really trying to engage with the dog and understand and adapt the work that we might choose to do, depending on what the dog's needs really are. And in a rehoming centre, we can't change the environment all the time, but we can use body work, groundwork, and really simple tools to change the dog's responses to that environment. This little guy, Rico, had a broken leg, brought up in a shelter while the leg was healed, went out and got returned after 2 or 3 years because of a breakdown in the family. Really what I would describe as a high-drive dog. Try to avoid labels, but we need words to describe the animals that we're working with. And he would always sleep on top of his crate. He couldn't bear to go in. They didn't shut him in the crate in the kennels, but he really liked to be able to see what was going on. So he came down to the farm. He was really falling apart in kennels, serious lead ragger. And when I say a serious lead ragger, you know, it's probably the same that you would call a serious lead ragger, but maybe not someone who's got a dog that occasionally just sort of grabs and flicks the lead a bit. This was quite intense. So it was limiting as well the walks that he could go on and the activities he could engage in. So he came down to the farm and we just started quietly working through his body. Most dogs, when they're in a state of arousal, whether it's excitement or whether it's distress, are really sensitive from the back of the rib cage back. It's a really important junction. I'll show you a picture of a skeleton in a minute. From T13, which is at the end of the thoracic spine, going into the lumbar area. And lots of dogs from that point backwards are really tight, really sensitive to contact. You might see the coat is dry and scurfy there as well. And that's where we start really looking at these really good indicators, because if we keep stroking the dog there or patting the dog or scrumpling the dog to encourage that sort of almost humping-like behavior, we're reinforcing the tension that's in the body. We then may have to do more work to train out the behaviors or train an incompatible behavior that are linked to the tension through this lumbar area, because this is very key in the fight, flight, freeze, faint, and fool around response. So Rico had really dry skin, really dandruffy, really stimulated by contact there. So I just started doing really quiet touch work on his chest. Most dogs settle more quickly if you touch them around the front of the chest. There's lots of nerve endings, really important anatomical structures in the neck as well. And also if you think about people, we go, oh, isn't that lovely? Or, oh, did that really happen? We hold our chest. And when there's a really strong physical response to something, we go red from the chest up. Our feet don't go red. You know, this is a really crucial part of responses, and we can use that to our advantage when helping dogs settle by keeping contact to slow stroking or slow movements of the skin around either side of the breastbone. Rico loved being touched on the chest. What we also noticed when we went to put his long lead on to take him out for a walk around the farm was actually the noise of the trigger clip was really, really stimulating for him. And they'd been using clicker training rightly with this dog to give him great experiences and to mark all the really calm, just watching behavior that we wanted him to learn. But actually, just by rushing a little bit, because we were so, keen to get him out, the clip flicked quite loudly. Have you got a lead there? And that was where the arousal started. So if you think what that must sound like when we're just doing it quickly to a dog that we might actually be clicker training and using a click to mark the behavior we want them to repeat, are we inadvertently creating more arousal from the moment we enter that kennel? So we just quietly use the trigger, holding it with the thumb. Same when you're putting on harnesses. Hold the clips together and squeeze them together rather than click, because you've already stimulated a dog that might be really sensitive to noise just because of the busyness of the center or the drive that that dog's got in his natural breeding. And we took him out really quietly round the farm. He was amazing, and stopped to start doing more work on his chest when he started to get a bit more tense. And that night, when he went back to the shelter for the first time in a year, he went and slept in the crate. So he didn't do any work around the crate. And from that moment on, he opted to sleep in the crate because his nervous system was just more relaxed, the muscles were more relaxed. He didn't need to be this sort of really hyper-vigilant dog all the time. So we're looking for detail. We're looking for these small bits that we might think are rubbish, but actually might be really meaningful for the dog. And I'm really glad Tony found this old piece of wood in our barn a few months ago, because he appeared triumphantly with it. And had I found it, it would have gone straight in the skip, because to me, it's just a bit of rubbish. When I said, "Why are you so pleased you found this piece of wood?" he said, "It's the last remaining piece of the balustrade from the library at Sunnydale High in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And suddenly, it has immense value. And certainly, I appreciate it more." So what we think is a disproportionate reaction or a disproportionate attachment to something we may be doing or would like to do, or a dog struggling and we really can't understand why, just remember there might be something really small that's really meaningful, and that is where we want to go as we're working a little bit with Mavis as well. So the only dog expert here is Mavis. We're dog detectives. We're looking for all this small information so we can really tailor every opportunity that we're given when we interact with these dogs, so that we're not inadvertently reinforcing postural and behavioural traits that we want to try and address. So can you see Mavis? You okay? I'll do like PowerPoint and work with Mavis too. I want to count her respiration. We want to look at the rise and fall of her abdomen. Count it. I want to feel her breath on my cheeks. You're a good girl. I want to let her greet me, and then I'm going to see what she does if I just quietly take the lead. Good girl. And I want to wait. This is a first date. And if I give her all my secrets and overhandle her and ruffle her and kiss her and everything, she might not want to date me again. Because if we greeted people the way we greet dogs, we'd often be arrested in the aisle at Tesco. So isn't it interesting as well, as the laughter has started, how she's got a bit more active? I've got the lead, so there's an anticipation, Mavis, good girl, that something's going to happen. So my holding the lead and the noise in the room has activated Mavis. Good girl, Mavis, good girl. So I want to look at the speed with which she turns towards me. She's very fast, good girl. And I'm going to just quietly stroke the lead. Mavis, good girl. Mavis. I'm going to just give you back the lead for a minute. And just quietly stroke the lead. Good girl. And just quietly stroke the lead, Daniel. Because she's not as driven, is she, to come that way. Now she's back with the person that's more familiar to her. So always remember, familiarity breeds content. Have something that the dog can go back to. I'm just going to take the lead again. And all too often, what I see is people go, here, take that dog. In the nicest way, everybody's busy, but the dog's thrown. She's got more active. What's changed? Me taking the lead. So we want to look for this small, polite language, good girl, and I'll see how she feels if she keeps a connection with Daniel, but I start maybe touching her quietly with the back of my hand. So just quietly straight the lead again. Set the camera as well, sweetie. Can I touch you? Good girl. If we just rushed and took Mavis off, we'd have a dog. Can you hear me? It's going a bit weird. We'd have a dog that was more distracted. Dogs don't lose focus, they shift focus. So she was shifting her focus away from us. Good girl, you're okay. So I'm just doing like 2 tiny movements of her skin, and I'm feeling this kind of fidget, left paw up. She does enjoy having her chest rubbed, but we also want to explore maybe why. Is there a trigger where there's tension in her back? She has no concept about why she's up here and what I'm going to do. Good girl. So sometimes I want to say, look, feel this. It's not alarming, and if it is, I will absolutely hear you. Her panting's going up. I can feel that. Good girl. So I'm just going to feed a little information into the nervous system and then see what she wants to do next. If she wants to go for a little schmooch, let her. Because she doesn't know why she's here. Drink. Interesting. It is so important that dogs have water when you're working with them, not just in the kennel and you take them out, but always with them, because after we start contact with them or start teaching them new skills, they often do need to take on board water. It might be part of a displacement activity. It might be that rush of, oh, something's going to happen, has just made her mouth go a little bit dry. What happens if you're going to an interview for Dogs Trust and you really want to work for Dogs Trust, or you want to go for a different position in Dogs Trust? You sit outside waiting to be called into the office or whatever your interview system is. Your mouth is probably a bit dry, and if someone goes, can I get you a drink? You immediately have got something to do with your hands. You can wet your whistle a bit as well. And it's really important that we give dogs that opportunity too. I use it as part of the assessment, the checking in. What was I doing that elicited a response in her nervous system? We don't know how she felt, but what we do know was there was a really strong response to suddenly having to go and greet everybody. So I look at greeting behaviour. Are they greeting other people in order to avoid the person that's holding the lead, or to avoid the activity that the person is asking them to engage in that's got the lead? Are they anticipating contact on a body that might actually be really uncomfortable through muscle tension or problems with the skeleton as well? Because in my experience, issues with particularly the hips are really overlooked in the majority of companion homes. So we want to count the respiration. We want to look for these small details. I call them CSI, canine sign investigations. I want to look at the response to contact, the coloration. Like, she really wants, to me, it looks like she wants to do a shake-off, but she's not quite able to do that yet. We want to know at what point does she do the shake-off? What triggers it? It doesn't mean that it was a bad thing. It just meant something happened. If you had to get a spider out of your bath and you really weren't confident around spiders, but there was no one to help you, you might go, oh, I did it, I got it out. But you also might go, oh, I'm so excited. It's kind of a similar response, so it can mean more than one thing, in my experience. And we also want to look at her gait, too. So do you mind just letting her go for a little walk? Because she actually feels really good through the body. Daniel's done an amazing, there's the shake-off. So interesting as well, getting her just to move enables her to give that nervous system response that she was kind of offering there, but she didn't really maybe feel safe enough or relaxed enough or happy enough to do it while she was up on stage. Good girlie. So let her have a sniff as well, because I want to watch the swing of the tail. And to me, at the moment, it looks more like it's swinging to the right. And she looks a little stiffer in the right side. And most dogs, in my experience, if they have hip dysplasia or if they have problems with the crucia, in a high proportion of cases, it's worse or it starts on that right hind limb. And lots of quadrupeds do move, so leading with the left fore. See it in cats and horses as well. But with dogs and horses, we reinforce that posture through our own habitual handling. I'll show you some pictures in a minute of the left lean that we teach dogs just by handling from our left side. Good girl. Good girlie. Super. And I want to look as well as she jumped up. She just slightly crabbed that back. So she does a lot of obedience. So Daniel rightly is teaching her to work as well on his right side to counteract this imbalance that inadvertently is being trained every time he competes with her. We also want to start noting how dogs lie. Does she always lie on that left side? Because what we start to see is training crookedness, encouraging more crookedness, where the dog, because of the imbalance through the body, starts to only lie on one side of the body. So one set of muscles is working every time that dog comes from the lie up into the sit or to the stand as well. And now she's switched sides. Great. You want to start clocking. That's part of your data gathering. Where are the dog beds? Are they encouraging the dog to lie in a specific posture for the majority of the time that they're in kennels? And I picked up a really, 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 really fearful puppy from another rehoming centre. And she was, I think, about 4 months old and genetic predisposition to complete phobia. Bless her soul. And she's now with a fantastic fosterer that does body work as well, which is great. Because really early on, it was very evident that she had spent all her time pressed up in a corner, up in a plastic bed, which was forcing her head into this posture all the time. And by the time she got to me at 4 months old, the big, wide vertebra in the upper part of the neck, the atlas, was already completely rotated or moved because of the muscle tension, and one ear was much higher than the other. So it was really difficult for her to even look to see and watch people or a hand approaching her from one side, because she'd been so reinforced physically from the way she'd been lying in the kennels. And gradually, as I was just doing tiny bits of body work with her, waiting for her just to say, oh no, that's quite nice, she started to lie more and more in the middle of her bed. Then she could stretch out. And when I took her up to Scotland, she was actually lying on her back across the whole of the back seat of the car with her legs stretched right up the back of the back seat, which was fantastic. So we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently forcing these postural habits onto these dogs as well. So we want to see as well, like if we encourage dogs to jump up, Daniel knows I'm teasing him at this point, we are putting pressure around that vulnerable T13L1 junction. So be really careful about teaching people or teaching dogs to beg. If they're really strong and have got good muscle, which Mavis has, and I can't tell you how amazing she feels from when I last felt her as well. You are an amazing dog guardian, Daniel. Okay, we've got the yawn as well, as I'm just feeling her through the neck. Again, it's a normal response, but often where there's a lot more tension, you get more yawning. And as I'm just sliding my hand quietly and stroking the hair on her neck, because direct hand contact, there we go, suddenly interested in food again, because I touched her. How many of these, difficult dogs that find it hard to focus, or dogs that, find it easy to sort of like work for food but actually can't be touched? How many of that are we, little signals are we missing and therefore reinforcing? And what she had to do again, she's gone to drink. This is quite a pressurised situation for Mavis, obviously, with people looking at her. But when I first met Mavis, she was more sensitive to contact through T13L1. But Dan and I were talking about it, and he has done a lot of core work. Not that I've taught him. He's gone and found that for himself. And she feels incredible, absolutely incredible. So as I was sliding my hand over the left side of that big atlas, could feel that she's got more development on that side than on the right. And when I was feeling her over there, and I'm actually not going to do it to her because she's very clear that it's a bit stimulating, a bit weird, but she's not too sure about me touching her with people looking at her, that her left ear is also tighter than her right. And again, if you think what we're teaching this when we're teaching a dog to look at us and walk to heel. Where is the body weight falling through as we're encouraging the dog to look up to the right? So in TTouch, we really encourage people to lead the dog from both sides. I do a lot with assistance dogs as well. And many years ago, I was working with a great assistance group. And they had all their young dogs in. And we were working with the trainers. And it was absolutely fascinating. All positive reward-based training, brilliant. But the dogs were bowing from the hock down into the right foot already at 14 months of age because of the wonderful connections they were building, but they weren't looking at the physical impact that was having on the dog's body. And what I see is dogs then tend to stand in a slight crab, and if we actually then have to move a dog away because they go, oh, there's something over there that's worrying me, or a dog's approaching that we know can't cope with being looked at by another dog. As handlers, we tend to move them to the right because most dogs find it hard to flex to the left, and so do people. So again, how many repetitions building one set of groups, muscle groups unevenly, are we doing every day? the head tilt with the treat. Don't waste your treat giving time. If you start watching dogs and they're handled mainly by a right-handed trainer, they will learn to watch not just the right side of that body, but they'll also start tipping their head one way. So really try to watch that as well and ensure that the treat delivery, when you give it, enables the dog to have even a moment of balance, because the nervous system will learn really quickly that over time, being in balance is more healthful, it feels better, it's less fatiguing than trying to maintain a crooked posture as well. And especially when we're working with the little guys, lots of small dogs spend a really disproportionate amount of their time looking up. And look at what the concertina effect through that dog's back. So again, lowering the hand or quietly dropping the hand to the floor, you can see that the dog halo is longer through this top line, more open. And what happens when a dog does go on high alert? Does the dog stay really relaxed through the body and slowly look effortlessly left to right? No, they often go, head comes up, back shortens, all the muscles tighten, especially trapezius, which is the triangular muscle group over the base of the neck and over the shoulders. And lots of dogs that are jammed, locked solid there, have been pulling along for a long time. Their heads are up here. They have what I call the uh-oh ears, or hardly any space between the base of the ear at all. And quite often those dogs are worried when the hand goes to take them by the collar, or a lead goes on or is taken off. So we want to use any opportunity we can through day-to-day handling to teach the dog to lower the head, to lengthen and lift the back, and engage those really important core muscles as well. Where's my pointy thing? So this is a really important junction. It's just at the back of the rib cage, you see there's a tiny little T11. This is a really old vintage drawing, but it's quite a clear one. So this is really important because it's the natural dip that occurs in, you can see it really clearly in bull breeds and sight hounds. But when dogs are really tight through these sort of muscle groups through here and not efficiently working behind and they're pulling themselves along from the front end, this T11 can get really tight, and then T13 to L1 is that sensitive bit. There should be a bit more movement in the spine. We've got a brilliant vet physio who's top TTouch practitioner who has really been able to help give us, even more awareness of the importance of the movement and the quality of movement from here. And I know a lot of this from my horse background, but I know a lot of people that work with dogs don't often really think about what lies beneath. So it's this really important junction. So keep contact to the front end until you really know that dog. And this you can see weakening through the muscles here, and that L1 vertebra starting to lift up. The dip of T11 where the dorsal spinous process changes direction. And this dog, not surprisingly, is really sensitive to contact and stands out of balance with the tail nearly always off to one side. Now, when you watch people leading dogs, start watching the tail, because the tail will balance the dog. So again, if we're only handling our dogs from one side, we're encouraging the tail to be slightly off kilter because of the balance through the dog's body. When you switch the handler and put them on the other side of the dog, the tail often then goes in the other direction as well. So again, think about these simple, tiny exercises to teach dogs. And you may have to truly teach them to be on the right side because they're so habituated to being on our left side. When you change a habit, it can make you feel really odd. So again, we do it in tiny increments. And this work is really influenced by the Feldenkrais work. He was similar to Alexander, looking at helping people change postural habits. And it was learning with Feldenkrais that made Linda really start to look at the dynamics of the problem animal with new eyes. So even with me curling my fingers and working quietly down through the back of this dog, I've started that nervous system response, that almost reflex, that pedal movement with the back leg. It shouldn't be there. It's to do with tension in the body. And I used to think it was normal because so many dogs did it. But it's actually linked to tension in the back. And then if you scrumple, quite often the dogs will lean into you and almost ask for that. But we're reinforcing the tension and often creating more tension through the skin by scratching as well. So we want to look at why is that there? And that drives excitability, can drive reactivity. Not saying that genetics aren't part of this, of course they are. But what we're looking for is quicker recovery and more moments where that animal is able to function in good physical, mental, and emotional balance as well. So just starting to work further forward so we can start releasing all the tension in the upper part of the body, and then I can creep along his body and just drip feed information in so we can start addressing why that response is there in his body. So one really simple thing that we start with is the back of the hand, just 1 or 2 strokes, or maybe the palm of the hand, and then wait and watch the response. Because Mavis was very clear, it's too stimulating for her in this environment. We can then do like what we call really quiet springbok. And it was Dogs Trust Bridgend that taught me that this touch, although Linda always said it was a stimulating touch, is brilliant for the dogs when they can't settle at all. And that actually it can be the key into starting that unwinding process. And it was in Bridgend long before the rebuild too, so that shows how long ago it was. And it's just literally imagining that the dog's got dust all over his body and we can just quietly pluck it off, and keeping the hand light and bouncing, and then all drip feed into maybe an area that we know may be a little bit more sensitive. Another one is a really quiet zigzag through the back, and the minute the dog's respiration goes up, or the blinking rate changes, or the dog starts to move or go into a micro freeze, go back to where the dog was okay with contact and didn't just tolerate it, actually started to really enjoy it as well. So I've talked about the muscle development, but I'm going to show you a picture of a horse, because for some animals, when we can't touch them, it's not safe, it's not rewarding to touch them. That's where the on-lead exercises really come into their own. And it's also great for dogs that are really, 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 really busy, because busyness just creates more business. And what I see is a lot of parallels between dogs that are really touch sensitive through the hindquarter, maybe have got hip dysplasia, maybe worth considering pain relief trials for these guys. Often as well find contact really unpleasant, might be mouthy, need to get out, jump up in kennels. So people throw balls for them, because there's not a lot else the dog can enjoy, but it actually reinforces more tension. And if there is an underlying skeletal problem, it's potentially causing more physical problems, which is then creating more tension, more sensitivity to contact. So the groundwork, slow on-lead exercises that will really help the dogs to move in better balance can be the way forward. And this horse came to us at Tilly Farm. Really, he is a bit of a quirky horse. He could have been bred in a private yard and maybe not socialised with other horses, because his body language is quite extraordinary. But he's got bracing muscle here, and he's got bracing muscle at the top around the pole joint area. And this part of the neck in dogs and horses is crucial for good movement behind. And you can see there's a break in the mane. You do get changes in the direction of the coat where there are natural swirls, but you also get changes where the muscle's building incorrectly underneath. So again, you can look through the dog's coat and see, are they building more muscle on one side? Is the coat sticking up more on one side? But look at the tension through this horse's muzzle. And we couldn't really touch him because where there was tension, you get quite a strong reaction, because either maybe it feels uncomfortable, or maybe it actually feels numb, because you've got so many receptors in the skin that can obviously detect vibration, all the different types of body contact, warmth and cold as well. But also, I think they start to get a bit impinged where you've got a lot of tension through underlying structures. I know certainly from humans, where there's been a lot of trauma, the skin has a really weird sensation to it. When you touch it, it can make people feel a bit sick. So I don't see why we should be the only species that has that reaction. So all we could do with groundwork with this horse and look at that left fore lean, that's how he had to stand all the time. So we couldn't help him with our hands. We had to just start teaching him, leading him between two people to weave through patterns of poles laid on the ground. And within 2 weeks, that's what we got. Because when you start unlocking the body, nature is not stupid. It starts to build it as it was designed to be. Look at the top line that's coming. The bottom line is soft, the muzzle's softer, the head carriage is down. This horse can now stand in balance. And it's the same for our dogs as well. How many dogs are busy because they can't maintain a stand? And it isn't just horses that are muscled incorrectly. If you really start looking at dogs through the body, can you see the difference in the muscles left to right through Hetty's back legs? And look at the set of the tail. This tells me she's actually been muscled like that for quite some time because she's quite crooked through the pelvis. It isn't just because she's standing on uneven surface. And we want to look at, can you ask Mavis to sit there and give her some treats? So we're going to make this fun for Mavis. If you look at her hind limb placement, she looks like she's holding that left hind leg more into her body than the right. It may have changed because we're not going to take one snapshot and say that's the definitive dog's posture, the definitive posture of the dog. But you can you see? Has she moved it now? Is it still out a little bit more on the right? So that already starts to fit with the stiffening through the right hind that I could see, and probably the corresponding change either side of her neck and the heavier left ear. Really interesting research with deer. I'm not sure they've done a true, good, robust scientific study, but they've noted that if a deer has a leg injury, often contralaterally, so diagonally, it affects the growth of the antler, and that the memory of that trauma in the antler stays for up to 10 years. Which I just find fascinating. And I see so many dogs that are touch sensitive on one ear, tighter on one ear, have less mobility when they're listening to sound through one ear than the other. And this is where sometimes in my experience as well, dogs start to get labelled as unpredictable because they go, well, I could touch his ears yesterday, but it might have been what ear was touched yesterday rather than having a sudden bad reaction to ears in general, although obviously ear infection's a huge problem too. What I've also seen so many times is dogs that are tighter through one side of the neck have got tighter ear, tighter through the hinge point to the jaw, and they're more likely to be more prone to ear infections in that ear more than the other. Not a robust scientific study by any means, but I see this again and again, and I do work with dogs that have been seized. I know nothing about their history, and I can feel through the body likely things that could have been part responsible for the problems that got that dog seized in the first place. And then I ask for veterinary records if they've got them afterwards. I don't want to be clouded. I really want to try and see the best that I can see in terms of what I can spot with the dog's behaviour and responses. So she really is interesting. And nothing in nature is symmetrical. You're always going to find something. But it's really important that Daniel carries on with doing all the brilliant work because she's going to have a fitter life, a longer life. She's going to be less prone to injury because she's using her body more effectively, even with what nature's given her. So can you see as well, to me at the moment, she can move the right ear more, and the left ear, it just doesn't have the same freedom of movement. So again, think of dogs that might have really tight ears. They're going to struggle with a harness going on over the head, and it might not be the harness going on that causes the problem. It might be as it comes off and it pulls the ears forward. So again, is it the harness that's the problem? It actually could be something going on in the upper part of the dog's head. And we can change it by doing really gentle work, stroking the ears from the base to the tip, starting with the curled finger, working around the hinge point for the jaw, maybe starting on the chest and coming up the side of the neck if that's better for the dog as well. And there was a really lovely guy that I heard interviewed on Radio 4, and he cuts up bodies for medical students, and he said he can tell what life the person had based on their muscles in the face. And he said he can tell if the person was happy because their smile muscles are well developed, or if they had a really unhappy life because they've got more definition through the frown lines. So again, think about, what are we building in our dogs every time we interact with them or even walk past them? And I like to look at all this information. What is Mavis's favourite side to lie on? We've seen her offer both, but what I see more is more of a curve on that left side, and it may be that she just wants to keep an eye on everybody here. But we want to start building the pattern. Look for these clues because they're all there. The dog's body and the nervous system never lies. Is that dog standing straight? No. Where's the weight? Down through that left foreleg. Big mistake is leads that are too short, where the dog needs that critical distance. And often our leads are too short. You have nice long leads in Dogs Trusts. The ones that I see when we're working with dogs on workshops too. But watch that some volunteers maybe aren't using leads that are too short, and if they are, just thread two together so that the dog's got a bit more space, because often that is enough to help that dog now walk parallel to the person's leg, or certainly not lean so much. Look at that right hind leg placement as well. I see this with so many dogs that are like really drivey, and this dog had an issue watching other dogs, so he'd come out on high alert. So when the posture is in when the body's in a certain posture, it does trigger certain things inside the body. So dogs that are really relaxed, you can see have often got nice wave through the body. Sometimes if they're tense, they might be a bit shut down and almost look like they're coping, but they might not be. So we might actually inadvertently be pushing them beyond their real comfort zone, or they've got that really high-headed, tense, reactive posture as well. But I see a lot of dogs, when the adrenaline's starting to rise, put their legs out. And think about it in terms of what we see in sportsmen. Jamie Murray or Andy Murray or Federer, they don't stand there like that. They're like that. They're ready. So they can go in any direction. Same with goalkeepers, ready, legs out to go in any direction. So sometimes you'll see a dog will kick out a leg, and that is a really nice early warning sign. He's spotted something. He's smelt something. He's heard something, or he's come out already in that state of arousal. And that's where, again, if it's safe to touch them when they're like that, we can do slow zigzags, work on the chest, get them to soften and lower the head, or drop treats on the floor, or use the brilliant bucket game to actually lower head posture. I use Chirag's game so much in the work that I do, and I use it as well to teach dogs to be able to take food and look at the left side as well as the right, because when you switch the bucket from left to right hand, you often see dogs that actually start to struggle. And I like to find these small details because we can work with those in small spaces. And think about all of it like yoga for dogs. How many fights break out in a yoga class? Hopefully none, because all the reactions are slow and calm and considered, and we're activating that brilliant parasympathetic nervous system. Where's the weight on that dog's body? Left fore again, isn't it? You can see this is Skipper. Another dog that was reactive to other dogs, and that hind limb placement again. All the way through this part of the body. And what you see in stand is exacerbated under movement. So really be each other's eyes, work together. You've got such phenomenal knowledge, phenomenal facilities, and phenomenal teammates in Dogs Trust. There really isn't another organisation like it. And really start being the eyes, because when you're leading a dog, you can't always see what's going on with the front limb or the hind limb. And if you're watching somebody walking a dog away from you, one way to tell what's going on with the hind leg is to look at the pads, because if a dog is stiff through the one leg, nearly always that right hind because of our habitual handling, you'll see less pad. You might just see, the big pad at the back of the foot, but you might see all the pads on that left foot. So it will tell you as well whether there is flexion going on through that hip joint and that hock joint. How am I doing for time? I don't want to keep you from your lunch. Oh, I've got to finish. So I'll just quickly run through some opportunities to look at the coat too. You're right for 2 minutes. Is that okay? So what have we got again? Right hind out, haven't we? I have so many photographs that it's actually hard to find, for me, a dog that's got the posture the opposite way, but they do exist. Probably 80% like this that I work with. But look at the colour of the coat here as well. It corresponds with that right placement. Look at the different feathering, left to right. So that might be that she lies more on this side and ruffles up that coat because of something maybe going on here. We're not going to leap to conclusions, but we're going to keep looking. Ask the dog to sit. Look again. Tension in that left ear compared to the right, possibly. Slightly sloping down through that neck. Right hind kicked out. Left fore taking the body weight. You'll start to see these postural patterns through every single part of that dog's life. And it's so easy to change these tiny postural traits. Even with her head up, we've still got crookedness through the neck. And the owner sent me these pictures because she was on a workshop. She said, "You've just described my dog. Can I send you pictures?" She said, "There's one place where we cannot touch her." She said, "and no one's been able to give us any answers." And it was this bit here. You can see the dip in the coat, and her coat was actually brown there. So the coat will also change colour where the circulation is inhibited to the skin. So I hope that's given you, so even on the move, my lovely cookie dough, reinforcing left fore loading. So I hope that's given you a bit of an insight into being a dog detective and just starting to slow down the handling, start on the dog's chest, because if we ruffle and pat dogs, is that going to help them settle or get them excited? Really start thinking about our impact as well when we're holding the lead. Most of the time we lean back. What happens to my hand? It comes up. That puts more pressure straight down that lead into the dog's collar. So again, just quiet stroking the lead helps you to lean slightly forward. It will protect your back, your shoulders, because your physical well-being is so important. Not just for now, but for the dogs as well, but for your long-term health as well. So taking just some of these tiny TTouch tips will help you hopefully be more comfortable through the body and help the dog settle and therefore learn. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me again.